All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Card Nellis, with, let's name him. Actually, we can't name him yet.
What is it? What are you going to say?
Yeah, okay. I say Cody the Oracle. Thank you for your participation in our subscriber
anyone could vote.
poll. Well, anybody could vote.
vote.
But a couple of podcasts ago, we asked all of our subscribers to suggest names for Cody. I preferred Killer Cody, but there were some creative names that came up, and we boiled it down to the top three. What are the top three for your stage name, Cody?
For my stage name, I believe the top three ended up becoming Learn to Cody, Cody the Oracle, and then there's several after that. There'd be too many to list. A lot of people who mention multiple at a time. So thank everyone. I appreciate it. Thank everyone who decided to throw a comment out there. Like I said, as of today, Learn to Cody is the #1 spot with 11 likes. So.
But at the end of the day, I think I like Cody the Oracle more.
I agree. It's a work in progress. We'll get it ironed out. I mean, I think most nicknames eventually you don't have to ask anymore. They're just there. You know what I mean?
You're gonna be like Charlemagne the God on the Breakfast Club.
I don't know quite about that, but we'll find it. We'll find it. It'll show up.
So as we said, I am Card Nellis, your host, with Cody the Oracle, or Learn to Cody, depending on which you prefer.
Yeah, what's the tiebreaker? We go. Finish it off right now. Tell us in the comments. Which one do you prefer?
That's true. Tiebreaker in the comments. Cody the Oracle or Learn to Cody. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit today about a new study that came out. This from the Daily Caller, also from...
well, the study wasn't from the Daily Caller, right? The study was from a German company, I believe?
Yeah, it was a German company. You're right. It was highlighted in the Daily Caller. It was fought in Clean Technica. And then we'll review a Scientific American article and study that talks about emissions in clean or green vehicles. Basically, in a nutshell, we have released here an interesting article that talks about how driving a Tesla actually creates and generates more CO2 than a Mercedes diesel. I believe in the study was actually a C220L or whatever the model was. So basically, the Tesla, the infamous Elon Musk electric car that's going to save us all from ourselves and our fossil fuel emissions and greenhouse gases. Actually, when you do the math and science studies from wheel to wheel greenhouse gas productions, a Tesla actually generates more CO2 than a diesel, like the dirtiest emission fuel source.
If I understand this correctly, it's not necessarily the Tesla itself that's doing this, but it's the what goes into powering it, what goes into charging the Tesla, all the work behind the scenes to the charging station. So theoretically, if that technology gets ironed out, then the Tesla's fine, right? Like it's not like the Tesla's putting all this stuff in the atmosphere. It's just the work going behind the scenes. Am I correct?
Okay, close. And this, we're going to dive into the details here because in this show, it's Problem Solver Politics because we really believe in solving problems and having a nonpartisan approach to very complex issues. We don't boil things down to sound bites. We actually dig into the data. So we've got 3 articles here that do a really important job of kind of demystifying the science and the art of trying to clean up our environment, which is actually a big problem. We've basically figured out that the 2 biggest culprits for human contribution to climate change, the vast majority of climate change is natural. We can't stop it. We're fooling and flattering ourselves if we think we can. And the scientific analysis of the ice shelves actually suggests we're not in a period of global warming, but in a period of global cooling right now, okay? But nevertheless, we do generally have a concern for the amount of CO2 and the amount of methane that we put in the atmosphere, okay? And if you look at electric vehicles, such as the Prius or the Tesla. A Prius, for example, has 6 batteries in it. And one of the biggest problems that we have had as human beings in our production and our disposal of our waste goods is we haven't mastered the art of disposing quite yet of battery acid. We haven't figured out a way to keep it from leaking into the rivers and through the plastic sheeting in the landfills and so on and so forth. So batteries in cars quickly became, after large scale production of these massive vehicles, one of the most polluting parts of not the emissions, but the creation of cars. Also, don't forget, factories have to run on something, and cars only account for about 24-25% of all of our carbon emissions. The rest is generally considered to be industrial or else whatever we use burning other fossil fuels. So we're just going to read this straight from the Daily Caller, so we're not, lampooning anybody's speech here. But a Tesla Model 3 is touted as a zero-emission car by government regulators, but it actually results in more carbon dioxide than a comparable diesel-powered car, according to a recent study. They further continue to say when the CO2 emissions from battery production are included, electric cars like Tesla, and they don't single out Teslas, but Teslas are the most well-known, are, quote, in the best case, slightly higher than those of a diesel engine or otherwise much higher, reads a release from the German think tank IFO.
Well, so I wonder, though, would this also imply then that in a way hybrids are almost like double whammies, or is a hybrid, because of the way it functions, where it just uses the power to help power it? That's just okay. It's like my larger question: are hybrids the way to go then? Maybe a pure battery not quite there yet. Maybe hybrids would be the way to go for on just purely emissions basis.
Okay, that's a very interesting question that has a two-part answer. Part of the answer's data, because we want to back up every one of our statements with data here, okay, is in the next paragraph. Driving a Tesla 3 in Germany, for example, is responsible for 156 to 181 grams of CO2 per kilometer, compared to only 141 grams per kilometer for a diesel-powered C220D that includes the emissions from actually producing the diesel fuel. Okay, so basically we have lodged now an accusation at electric cars personified by the Tesla that a C220D diesel-powered engine, actually, if you include the carbon emissions used in refining the diesel fuel from crude oil, as well as the production of the vehicle, emits less CO2 into the atmosphere than a comparable electric car, such as a Tesla or a Prius here in America. Okay? We knew as of studies from nearly 10 years ago that a gas-guzzling, oil-dripping military Hummer has a lesser carbon footprint than a Toyota Prius does. So we knew a long time ago that you had to actually consider the production of the carbon emissions used in production as part of the carbon footprint of a vehicle. But now, after a longitudinal study, we figured out that, okay, it's costing us a lot more carbon to make and run these vehicles than their comparable diesels. However, now let's go back and let's see what the counter argument is, okay? This actually comes from Clean Technica, Electric Car Mythbuster, wheel-to-wheel emissions from cleantechnica.com. And obviously, these guys are...
Do you think they're interested in emissions?
These guys are fighters. They're fighters on behalf of this new energy. And it's actually really important that we engage in this argument so you can demystify what is now the new religion. I mean, honestly, AOC is actually suggesting that, well, no longer suggesting, because technically nobody voted for the Green New Deal, okay? But it seems to me wildly unfathomable that an idea that the government should take responsibility and control, for lack of a better term, over every building in the United States of America and its efficiency due to environmental concerns.
Well, but what I think an interesting question this kind of does raise, though, and it could be an interesting debate to have, is when we're talking about the environment and, what is the actual impact of vehicles on the roads in really Western developed nations that we have any say in? I mean, they're going to use whatever cars they want in a lot of other countries because they're right to. I mean, China doesn't have to drive different cars because we want them to, but what is that impact? Like, is that really where the effort needs to be a focus right now, is on carbon emissions from vehicles? Like, talking about Teslas, we're talking about, consumer vehicles. I mean, some of these people, they use their car to drive 9 miles to work, 9 miles back, a little bit here and there errands. Like, is that really where the focus needs to be? Or is that just kind of one of the easiest things because a lot of people have cars and we're all in cars. We all see cars. They're in front of us. Mm-hmm. Cars must be bad. Smog was bad. Cars did cause smog at one point. I remember my father tells me a funny story. He lived in the San Fernando Valley. He said when they started clearing the smog, he realized that's why they call it a valley. There's mountains over there. But the point being, though, like, is that really where the focus needs to be right now, is on vehicles? Or is it possible that maybe we could do a lot better get a lot further focusing on stuff that's bigger scale. I mean, it's a huge scale. We live in Los Angeles. There's so many cars on the roads. But I just wonder if you're saying that even a Tesla, theoretically, when you put in the battery, manufacturing and disposal and all that isn't any better. Like, is that even really worth focusing on?
You know what? To answer your question, actually, let's go to the scientificamerican.com article. That was the third article we were going to talk about. And right next to that picture of the first Scientific American cover that they highlight in the article, you'll notice it says this stat here that cars and trucks are responsible for roughly 24%, as I said earlier, of U.S. greenhouse gas pollution, nearly 1.7 billion metric tons per year. So I'd say 24% is large enough, even though it's...
That's pretty big. That is sizable. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's sizable. So anyway, go back to cleantechnica.com. And with the limited amount of time, we're going to truncate a lot of these arguments. But they say, quote, the manufacturing a mid-sized electric vehicle with an 84-mile range results in about 15% more emissions than manufacturing an equivalent gasoline vehicle. For larger, longer electric vehicles that travel more than 250 miles per charge, the manufacturing emissions can be as much as 68% higher. So actually, the longer range you try and give a vehicle, the worse its emissions get, probably because you have to include more and more and more and more battery technology, which has a lot of what? Battery acid. Okay. So this guy, in a very snarky fashion, says, wow, 68% higher. That's a lot, huh? So it's true, electric cars are dirtier than conventional cars, right? Well, actually, no. The report goes to say these differences, quote, change as soon as the cars are driven. Now, this is where I'll actually disagree with the science on this. It says EVs are powered by electricity, which is generally a cleaner energy source than gasoline. Yes, to burn. It's in a battery that doesn't produce any carbon as it burns the electricity inside, okay? And the car's moving forward with no tailpipe, releasing carbon emissions into the air. So the actual act of driving doesn't, but, okay, he makes the claim that battery electric cars make up for their manufacturing emissions within 18 months of driving. Shorter range models can offset the difference basically within 6 months and then continue to outperform gasoline cars until the end of their lives. Yes, if you are in Vermont, where 1.6% of their energy comes, or their electric energy that you use to charge that car comes from burning coal, and all the rest comes from much cleaner sources. But at the end of the day, just like how we used to measure commute times in New York City when I lived there, people would always talk about their door-to-door commute time, because at the end of the day, how long it takes you to drive there on the train or on the subway doesn't matter. It's from the time you're able to leave your front door to get to the door of your work. That's the true measure of a commute that includes walk time and bus time and so on and so forth. So door-to-door commute time, wheel-to-wheel carbon emission calculations show that a lot of this actually depends not on the car, but on the energy source. So now let's go to the scientificamerican.com.
Well, but I wonder, though, because if we're saying that it really does, like, basically it gets kind of negligible when you're talking about total effects from your average gas vehicle and your electric vehicle, then what's the answer? What should we be using? Because we established, like you said, it's a big part of the...
Dude, I'm glad you got there, and that's exactly what I'm going into, man.
Man.
That's perfect, though. That's a great question. And let's underscore your statement here with the headline and the subline of this Scientific American article. Electric cars are not necessarily clean. Okay, good. Finally, somebody is going after the dogma that if we all just buy hybrid cars, that we all can rest assured that we, quote, did our part for the environment.
Well, but this article was from 3 years ago. Has anything changed, I think, in the last... I mean, I'd have to imagine
the generalities have
in
not.
that sense, right? Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
okay.
And a lot of these studies take a decade to pull off. So, talking about an article written in 2016 is actually quite relevant, okay? But they go on to continue and basically say, your battery-powered vehicle is only as green as your electricity supplier. Finally, wheel to wheel, we're getting to the truth and the bottom of whether or not your electric vehicle is clean. The vehicle itself is just a vehicle. How did we charge it? And this gets really important depending upon where you live. So look at this. Cars and trucks are responsible for roughly 24% of the U.S. greenhouse gas pollution. Because those emissions come from hundreds of millions of tailpipes, this source of pollution seems difficult to control. Shifting it to hundreds of smokestacks at power plants that supply electricity to charge electric cars therefore seems like a more effective way to clean up the fleet. And there's some very, very interesting stats here, okay? If you actually look at some of these states, you'll notice some pretty interesting facts, okay? Places like Vermont burn 1.7% of the electric energy in Vermont comes from coal burning plants. And coal ash is the most polluting way of creating energy. It's one of the most consistent, which is why it has remained so popular. And the majority of electric power in Germany, where our first study came from, comes from coal burning plants. However, in places like Vermont, less than 2% of electrical energy comes from coal burning plants because they've invested in what? Gasp, dare I say, nuclear energy. Alternative energy sources that actually work. Whereas in West Virginia, guess what percentage, bro, comes from coal burning plants?
Oh, West Virginia, 90 plus?
It's 97%.
90 or 97?
I mean, it is basically, look at this. According to Clean Technica, EVs charging in Vermont are estimated to produce fewer emissions. Oil and gas make up only 1.2% of the electrical sources in the state, while cleaner sources such as nuclear, hydro, biomass, wind, and solar make up the rest. West Virginia's electrical production, I'm sorry, my dyslexia kicked in there. It's 95.7, not 97%. It's 95.7 from coal, making it the state with the most wheel-to-wheel CO2 equivalent emissions. So at the end of the day, please understand you might be cool just because you get an electric vehicle, because let's face it, if you show up in a Tesla, I think your cool points pretty much
they do other cool things. They drive themselves. They have those cool tablet kind of style monitors in them. They do cool. You can download updates with like Wi-Fi. They do cool stuff.
Yeah. So we're not going to debunk the cool factor. Electric vehicles, totally cool. But we're going to debunk the dogma that has become, no better word for it, but religion, a dogma amongst a lot of these pseudoscientific climate change and environmentalist circles that electric vehicles are our future. I think they're a big part of the future. I think they're definitely worth investing in, but we're focusing way too much on the vehicles and not on the energy production. Please go watch our podcast on nuclear energy and why it's so necessary. And please like, subscribe, and share this video. If any of your friends start patting themselves on the back for having a Tesla, drop them this link. No.